Hey y'all, this is Kyle Thomas of Exhorder, Trouble, and Heaviest Texas, and you are listening to Jet on Metal Messiah Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Metal Magdalene with Jet right here on Metal Messiah Radio. Tonight we have a special guest joining us. We have Kyle Thomas, lead vocalist for the metal band Exhorder, as well as Trouble. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, so Kyle, Exhorder started out over 30 freaking years ago. So what was the metal scene like in New Orleans? And I know I don't pronounce it the way y'all do down there.
You can say it however you'd like, but most people here would say New Orleans. But that's not that important. Metal scene here when we started. It was pretty much not what we were interested in doing anymore at the time. The heavy metal scene, 1985-ish, was a whole lot of glam and hair tossing, and a lot of promoters that wouldn't encourage bands to play originals, but they wanted to milk them for playing covers for 3 hours a night, make them a lot of money, and not share the money with the band. And we just weren't about that. Crossover was a big thing at the time, and we were diving into, more into the punk rock side as well. So we kind of just gravitated towards going to the punk rock shows because it was a more of a feel-good thing, less scenester type situation. And they embraced us. We were a metal band that had a lot of punk influence at the time. And eventually that kind of started to sway in either direction, I guess, depending on how we were feeling at the time. There were times where we were probably more punk than metal. But that was kind of the deal, was the metalheads weren't so eager to embrace the punks. But the punks seemed more interested in a unity thing and kind of an island of misfit toys, if you will. That was where we found our home.
You guys were kids, really, when you started Exhorder. So what were, like, the early days of the band like? Of course, you didn't have nowhere near the responsibilities you have as an adult, but what were, like, the earlier days of the band like when you guys first put it together as, like I said, kids?
Yeah, I mean, I was the youngest. I was 16 the summer that we started. I was a very young 16 because it really was more like spring of 86, and I had just turned 16 in March that year. And I believe Chris was 17 going on 18. Vinny was 18, David Main was 17 going on 18, and Andy was the oldest one at maybe 21, something like that. So he was the only one that was, like, really even old enough to go do anything he wanted to. But we literally just kind of started writing songs in Chris Nail's house in the summertime while his mom was at work. We would go cram into his bedroom with the amps and write songs, and then eventually we moved down to the garage because it was more space, of course. And that's what we did that whole summer, was write the Get Rude demo, so to speak, and we recorded it at the end of the summer, and within a year we recorded the Slaughter in the Vatican demo, and we were just rolling. It just seemed like every song that came out, one right after the other, was just more on fire than the one before. And like you said, we were kids. We weren't really thinking about trying to write anything groundbreaking or trend setting. We just wanted to write songs that we wanted to hear. And we were probably a lot more worried about where we were going to get the next beer from at the time, I would think.
So what kind of, like, were you guys playing out at all? Like, I know back then a lot of people were, like, playing in people's backyards on their decks and shit like that. So were you guys doing any of that?
Yeah, we mostly played like I said, the punk rockers embraced us. So we would jump on a bill with the first show we ever played. A lot of local bands and No FX actually played it.
Oh, wow.
As well. And afterwards, some of the punk rock bands that were more established took us on and let us have opening slots. And then the next thing you know, we're headlining and playing to our own shows, 500 kids every time we played. It was a very quick ascent to the top of the scene where we were. And then the next thing you know, getting an opening slot at our gig was kind of like the primo thing to attain if you were an up-and-coming band. We played a lot of shows with bands like Agnostic Front, Rollins Band, Corrosion of Conformity, when they were still punk rock Corrosion of Conformity, of course. Mm-hmm. And that's who took us under their wings, you know, and we took a lot of lessons off of playing with the punks. They showed us a much different mindset than we knew growing up.
And so, I mean, do you miss anything about those days?
I miss my 16-year-old body. Just the fact that I didn't hurt every day when I was a kid. Other than that, I don't miss it because life has gotten to be more pleasant and sweeter the older I get, oddly enough. So I think the magic that we had back then, where there were just so many kids going to the shows, such real interest. It was an event. It wasn't just a concert. It was like a family gathering every Friday or Saturday night. And, you know, like I said, kind of like that Island of Misfit Toys thing. And anybody could come. As long as you weren't starting trouble, anybody could come and get involved.
And, you know, back then, too, there was nowhere near all the ways that we have to get, like, the word out about our bands and, you know, where we're playing. And so were you, like, doing all that, like, tape trading and flyering everything in sight and that kind of thing, too?
Yeah, we wasted a lot of staples on a lot of power pole back in the day. That's for sure. And that was kind of the fun part about it when you had a show coming up. That was definitely my thing. I liked making the flyers. We always had funny flyers. We always had funny shows. We've always been just a bunch of clowns at the end of the day. You know, we're serious about our music, of course, but when you come to our show, it's not just raised fists and spiked wristbands and stuff. You're going to laugh as much as you're going to, you know, clench your teeth and bang your head for sure. And that's definitely something that we always attained, strove to attain, really, was make it more than just, you know, a totally serious environment. I don't know. We're just not serious people at all.
And your, you know, Slaughter in the Vatican, you know, released on cassette, you know, as your demo, and then was picked up and released as your first full length off of Road Runner Records, which was they were a huge freaking deal back then. So tell us how that all happened and how, you know, how did you get on that label? And geez, how'd that all?
That's a strange story, to be honest with you. We initially signed with a label called Mean Machine, which we were talking with Borovoy Krigan at the time. He was affiliated with this label. It was a subsidiary of like a jazz label called Three Cherries, and they were trying to get this label off the ground. I think they actually may have released that first Violence record, because it was, I think when they initially signed Violence, we were in talks with signing them at the time, but we were actually defunct at the time, and Vinny and Jay Saravalo were starting to put everything back together, but they didn't have a complete band. So I think, that the easy decision was to sign Violence because they were functioning and together. Right. Mm-hmm. So then we reformed and started negotiating. We signed the record deal and started recording the album. Well, as we started recording the album, the label folded. So they ended up selling our contract to Roadrunner. So we kind of went with Roadrunner by default. Not that we were unhappy about it at the time, because they were pretty much the label to sign with back in the day. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of what happened. They inherited our contract and our session, which was a nightmare. Recording that album was a nightmare from square one. We had a demo that we, as a band, wanted to use as the album, and the label didn't feel like aspects of it were strong enough. The funny thing is the real old schoolers prefer the demo to the album, and mm-hmm. a lot of them don't even like the album. And then the album ends up in the, in Hall of Fames and best of lists. And I think it just tended to be a cult favorite over the years, some kind of way. Songs are strong.
It did. It is. And and after you signed with them, I mean, how did that change your careers? I mean, we were playing, more shows. How did that change?
At first, not really. We still were just kind of doing it our way. They kind of just came in and, they weren't a big label at the time, and we weren't one of their big bands, so we didn't get a lot of the love that some of the other bands got. And we just got out and played when we could. Our drummer was a full-time student at Louisiana State University, so he wasn't always available. We just did what we could. We'd go do weekends, like a 3-day weekend, like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and come home on Sunday. And then we eventually started getting on the tours, but we really didn't do like a full U.S. tour until the law came out, actually, and then we ended up getting kicked off of that anyway. So everything that we did in the beginning stages, before the band broke up after the law, everything that we did was mostly do it yourself, or like just really small, small budget touring, just living out of vans and that sort of thing. Just stuff that would totally drive guys my age into retirement permanently because it's just too hard to live that way mm-hmm. at this point in the game. But when you're a kid, you don't give a damn.
That's true. And like you said, you went on to do the law. And then I'm kind of interested to hear about this getting kicked off the tour bit there, Kyle.
I'm bad.
Since you brought it up, now we want to know.
Yeah, we always like to joke that was Dead Horse's fault. But, I mean, we, of course, have our accountability in that as well. But Dead Horse jumped on that tour on the southern leg, and they were like old friends of ours. They're just, some of our best buds that we had back in the day, and they're as awful people as we were. So we're just rolling through the South into the West, raising hell, having a great time. But we were touring with Entombed, and at the time, it was billed as a dual headliner tour. So, ultimately, our label is, putting out the tour support for us to be on this tour. But Entombed's management and road crew weren't too keen on doing anything for us, and we were led to believe that they were going to be, moving our gear and setting it up for us and everything. And it was ugly for the first few weeks, and there were some threats made. I'm not going to say who threatened who, but it really, at the end of the day, wasn't between the bands. They were pretty young. Most of them were a lot younger than us, and it's strange because in later years I heard, Entombed's a wild bunch of guys, but when we were touring with them, they were playing Game Boys and drinking milkshakes. Half the band was, they were that young, and a couple of the other guys would come hang out with us and drink beers and cut up or whatever. But we seemed to get along with them, but the tension was there because of the issues between us and our management. Well, make a long story short, by the time we got out to California, we're raising so much hell with Dead Horse that there was a backstage area in like Los Angeles or Riverside, somewhere like that, and we just destroyed it. It was it was really bad. We had food fights. There's an urban legend that going around that someone defecated on a plate and stuck a fork in it, and passed it off as pate with crackers.
Oh.
But I can neither confirm nor deny that story. And in any event, we were kicked off of the tour, but they allowed us to drive from Los Angeles all the way up to San Francisco to tell us that we were kicked off, which added another 8 hours round trip for us to get home. And it was just bad, and Label was angry with us, and rightly so. And in hindsight, we missed maybe a little less than half of that tour. But we went down the East Coast. We started up in the Northeast and went down the East Coast, across the South into the West, and we were supposed to go back up West and then across back over and end in the East again. We just didn't make it.
Never made it past San Francisco.
No, it was bad. Yeah, Greg from Dead Horse he came out to the van. He's like, dudes, I hate to tell y'all this, but they're kicking y'all off the tour, and like we're ready to jump out and go, like, kick some ass, right? And he's like, stay in, y'all. There's like 10 dudes hiding in there with stun guns, and they're just waiting for y'all to screw up. It's like, all right.
So,
tail between the legs, head back to New Orleans.
Yeah, that stun gun thing would do it for me too.
No thanks.
So, I guess it wasn't too long after that, right, that y'all split up, right?
That was like April or May of '92. We went back to Europe in late summer, I think. Mm-hmm. And I remember the last show we played on that tour, I think was at Bebob in Belgium. And I remember being on that stage, and I remember the last few notes of the last song playing, and I remember thinking to myself, this is the last show I'm ever going to play with this band. Because we had so much inner turmoil at the time. We were always fighting with each other. Death metal was on the rise, and we were not a death metal band. We were more of a thrash band, and not even like pure thrash. We just were a thrashy type of punk New Orleans thing, Mm-hmm. And really we're having a difficult time finding where we fit in because the thrash movement was ending, death metal was taking over, and we kept getting booked on all these death metal festivals, and we just felt like it wasn't really where we belonged. And it was frustrating to us. The label was frustrated with us because they were like, there's nothing to market here. All that we can market is how violent y'all are. It's like, well, I don't know. It's funny. It is funny, actually, because this past summer that we were on tour, my manager stated to me that the promoters were very happy to know that we don't break things anymore. I'm 48. If I break something, there's a chance I'm going to break a hip. So I can't.
So, after you guys all split up that first time, was that when you went and joined Trouble?
Oh, that actually was like the third time that we've.
Oh. Okay, so after you split up the third time.
Actually, the first thing that I did, that I really did on my own after that, there was a couple of things. and tried to put a project together with my brother that didn't happen, and it never did come to fruition. Mm-hmm. That was in Austin, Texas. I spent a week or two out with Corrosion of Conformity auditioning for them before Deliverance came out. And then I came back home, and my brother moved back home from Austin, and we sat down every night and wrote what eventually became the Floodgate Penalty album, which was released on Roadrunner in 1996. Mm-hmm. So that was just a one-and-done album band thing. I mean, we had a lot of really great things happen to us. We did main support for Sepultura on the Roots tour in Europe. We played the very last show that they played before they broke up that version of the band. Mm-hmm. So we saw it all. It's funny because I was just reading an article about that earlier tonight, and I was like, man, that just brings up so many memories. Mm-hmm. So that was something. I played guitar and sang in that band, and it was a lot different from Exhorder. It was more along the lines of what I grew up listening to, just bluesy, metal rock-ish stuff. And while I was in that band, I became friends with Ron Holzner, that used to play with Trouble back in the day. He plays in the Skull now. And through him and his wife Carol, they brought me on board, and I did a show with them that was just kind of like a one-off thing. They got back together to do a show, and it was supposed to be multiple singers getting up to sing a song or two. It was supposed to be like John Garcia, Wino, Kirk Winstein, Phil Anselmo. There was supposed to be just all these guys getting up and singing a song or two, and like they just one by one they started dropping off, and it ended up just being me and Wino at the end of it. And I think Wino and the guys in the band talked, and they just came to me and said, "Do you think you could do the whole show?" I was like, "Yeah." So that's what ended up happening, and I did about 2 or 3 shows with them back in the day, between 1997 and 2000. It was just we would do these little one-off gigs, and I mean, for me, it was always a pleasure because I loved Trouble. Mm-hmm. But shortly after that, they ended up getting Eric back in the band, and they did that one album with him, and then eventually they got Corey Clark in the band, and 2012, and they had all these songs ready to go, and they just kind of handed them to me and said, see what you can do with them. And I did about 2 or 3 songs and sent them back, and they were like, yeah, let's do this. So for me, it's always been, as long as Eric's not in that band, I'm happy to be in it. If Eric, is in the band, well, that's fine for me too, because I'm a Trouble fan before I was ever a member of Trouble.
Right.
And that was, that people asked me when he came back, they're like, are you mad? And I'm like, why would I be mad? One of my favorite bands is Together, but if they're not working with Eric, then I want the gig. I don't want to see it with anybody else. I feel like it belongs to me if it doesn't belong to Eric,
And that's the way it's been too. What was it like to write with Trouble, like you did on Simple Mind Condition, as compared to like Exhorder or anything else that you were writing with?
Well, they had all the music written. Mm-hmm. When I jumped on board. Bruce had a couple of songs where he had some lyrics and vocal ideas, and Rick had maybe 1 or 2 little spots in a song, and otherwise they just kind of let me tear loose on it and do what I did, and they were happy with, except maybe tweaking a thing here or there, asking me, can you try this instead of this, and that was really nice. But this time around, because we're actually in the earlier stages of pre-production for a follow-up to the Distortion Field, and this time they've actually written songs with me in mind as the singer, instead of these songs were written when Corey Clark was in the band, but that didn't work out. So let's give it to Kyle and have him, bat cleanup, I guess.
And so what's going on with them now?
Well, like I said, we've got some. They've got a handful of songs that I haven't gotten a hold of yet, but I've tracked maybe 4 or 5 early stages of a song that they've sent to me here and there. So they've, I guess about 4 or 5 songs that I've done pre-production on so far, and they've got that many more at least that I haven't worked on, maybe even more. So nothing happens quickly with Trouble. It's been that way for a long time. But at this point, we're really not looking to hurry to get something out as much as let's make it right and make it a great album. We've waited this long. I would hate to hurry up and just slap something together just because we haven't had an album come out in 5 years,
Well, we'll be waiting for it. Hopefully we won't die before it comes out, Kyle, but we'll be waiting for it.
Hopefully none of us in the band do either. We're all.
Okay, so now getting back to Exhorder again. So tell us about, Exhorder getting back together. What was it now? You said after the 3rd breakup, and what's been going on with the band since?
The last time we split up back in 2011, it was really ugly. I think it just gets uglier every time we break up because you got to figure we've all been together since we were kids, so it's really more like brothers than it is friends. And sometimes, I don't know if you've ever seen brothers fight, but it gets ugly. And, but when we love, it's really strong and it's really obvious and it shines. And I think this last time around, I've got to stop saying never because I've said I'll never play with that band again. I've said that so many times, it's not even funny. And I'm just making myself look like a fool for not coming through with what I say. But really, in all seriousness, Vinny and I were hanging out. We were with our wives one night watching Corey Feldman play. And we just got to talking, and he said, man, I've got a lot of stuff written still, because he was working on that Year of the Tyrant project. He's like, I got a lot more stuff coming. He's like, and some of it was actually that stuff that you and I had worked on back, when we were trying to give it another go. And he said, there's this management company that wants to work with us and thinks that they can really do something with this. Would you be interested? And the funny thing is I had just come from saying maybe a few months before that if Vinny had said that he wanted to do it again, I would probably say yes, because I don't know what it is about this band, but I could join Metallica tomorrow, and the interest that people have in it would be less than, not Metallica, but in the interest in seeing me in Metallica. People would be less interested in seeing that than they would in seeing me be with Exhorder.
Right.
It's just the way it is. We just did a whole summer's worth of shows, and it was bigger than anything that we've ever done. It's, bigger than anything I've ever done in any other band. And I always joke that this is the only job that I'll ever have where I can leave for 10 years, come back and get a raise. I don't know why that is, but give the people what they want. I'm not going to argue with it. It makes me happy to know that things that we said and did 20, 30 years ago that we weren't even really putting that much thought into down the line, it's spoken to a new generation behind the ones like our children now listen to Exhorder, and they're turning their friends onto it, and there's just a whole uprising of young people that like it. And, you know, God help the earth, because that's not a good sign. But, you know, I mean, I guess for business purposes, that's a great sign.
But, you know, it's like you said too, Kyle, you guys went over and you did all those shows overseas this year. And, of course, I was watching it on all your timelines and all Vinny's live feeds and everything. And it really, really looked like a whole different band. Everybody was so happy, and the crowds were, like, crazy and so happy to see you guys. I mean, what was that whole 2018 touring experience like for you?
It was something to be grateful for. We've gone through a lot over our lives, especially with this band. Good times, bad times, but we paid a lot of dues over the years, and smartly we put together a lineup this time that's very, not only, you know, great players and very professional, but everybody gets along really, really well. We had to learn each other in the early stages of the touring, because, you know, most of us had never spent much more than a few hours together at a time. And for all intents and purposes, when you're touring, you've got roommates and you live together, and that's just the nature of touring. You've got to be compatible with who you're living with. Otherwise, those long trips where everybody's stuck in the tin can on wheels can get very interesting if everybody's not getting along. So we've got strong love for each other and mutual respect for each other. And damn it, if these guys can't play, that's no knock against anybody that's ever been in this band, because anybody who's been in this band has to be a cut above everybody else. And, you know, these guys are all fantastic, and everybody that's been in this band is fantastic in their own way. Some better than others at some things, and some not so much. But right now, I think we've got a magic, and we're going to have to do our best to keep everybody happy and on board.
So tell everybody, Kyle, what is the current lineup of the band?
Well, the only two original members left are myself and Vinny Labella. But the second guitar spot is now taken by Marzi Montezeri. Marzi and I have another project called Heavy as Texas, but he's also played with Philip H. Anselmo and the Illegals, as well as Superjoint Ritual. So he's been around. He's not a beginner that we discovered. Marzi's got star power. He just went and played the Randy Rhoads Remembered show as a guest of Randy Rhoads' family, you know, playing with Rudy Sarzo and, you know, just doing it for real in Randy Rhoads' camp. That's something to be admired. Jason Vibrooks is probably the longest tenured Exhorder member outside of me and Vinny. He was actually a member of the band back in 2011, but he goes back to us all the way to 1993, even, when we were trying to keep it together after we came home from Europe, from that tour that I said that was probably going to be our, you know, I knew it was going to be our last show, but we hung on for a little bit trying to make it happen to do a third album, and it just fell apart. But Jason he had been in Heathen at the time, and he was trying out for Exhorder back then, and he was going to be the guy. And then we just imploded for good around that time. But when he and Vinny had the Year of the Tyrant project, they had Sasha Horn on drums, and Sasha also played with Heathen, as well as I think he did some live touring with Forbidden. So he's been around that West Coast thrash scene as well. So the three of them kind of came as a package with Year of the Tyrant, and Marzi and I kind of came as a package with Heavy as Texas. So we kind of merged the two bands, and And Marzi and I still have the Heaviest Texas thing. That album's going to be out in the spring, which sounds phenomenal, by the way. But
I saw you guys making the video.
Oh yeah, yeah, we had a good time. That was a great time.
And so, hey, you guys also got signed to a Nuclear Blast. So tell us about that, and what's that mean for the band now, there, Kyle?
Well, I'm not surprised that Nuclear Blast was the one. I was never surprised. I kind of had a feeling it was going to be Nuclear Blast, because as long as Monty Connor has breath in his body, he's going to believe in this band. He was always a fan. He was always the one when things weren't right with us at Roadrunner. Monty stood up for us. From what I understand, he put his neck on the chopping block for us one time and said it's either them or me. And he won that the first time, and then the second time, I think he was advised that you're not going to win the "it's them or me" contest. So it was us. But Monty signed me with Floodgate. He believed strongly in that project as well. Monty's definitely got a great knowledge of the industry and a great ear for outstanding music. He's been responsible for many, many successful acts, and for him to still believe in us after all these years and after all he's been through with us, from what I understand, all he had to hear was one of our demo tracks from the pre-production we're doing right now, and he was sold. He was ready to go. So I think he just wanted to know, can they still do it? And when he heard that we could still do it, he knew at that point, all right, we need to do this because I know what's going to happen.
So you kind of answered the question then. So you are working on new material.
Oh, absolutely. We are. That's no big secret. We had to keep it a secret for a long time, but yeah, we're actually starting recording, actual recording of the album next week. We're just wrapping up the pre-production right now, so we've kind of gone in and recorded all the songs, almost like a practice album. Mm-hmm. Just something that I did with Alabama Thunder Pussy back in 2006. And I think it's a great way to record an album. It gives you an idea of what the song's going to sound like before you commit to it. That way, if there's things that don't really work that well, you can make adjustments to it before you really get in there. And you also have the problem, most musicians understand this, there's nothing worse than having an album out that people consider a classic, and when you listen to it, you're going, God, I wish I had a do-over on that part, or, maybe we should have tried this instead. And a lot of that has to do with just not having that much studio time. But today, with the way technology is, it's pretty inexpensive to record something quality and have it sound, well enough for you to say, okay, well, it sounds album-worthy now.
And where are you recording, Kyle?
We are tracking the album at a studio here called OCD with Dwayne Simino. He's the proprietor as well as the engineer. Crowbar's recorded several albums there. Lots of bands from here have recorded there. It's a cozy place, not too far from where we live. He's got great equipment, and more than anything, Dwayne knows what he's doing, and that's half of it right there.
And do you guys have any idea when it's going to be, maybe released, or when you'd like to have it out by?
I would say, now, here I am. I'm the singer. We've hired management, and I'm half owner of Exhorder LLC. And I don't know. But I think it's probably going to be later in the year, like probably closer to autumn, I would say. Late summer, early autumn at the earliest. I can't see it being ready before then.
And what could you tell us about this? What can we expect when this is all said and done and out there?
We are definitely going to have blasts from the past on this album. There's going to be thrash moments. There's going to be, for lack of a better description, groove elements, because that's, I guess, who we are. I think we've been cited as pioneers of the groove sound, so there will be groove. We're from New Orleans. It's going to boogie at some spots. It's just going to. But I think it's going to be a more pleasantly mature songwriting experience. I think we're probably straying less away from the 8,000 intricate parts in the song and focusing more on good songs. That's not to say that they'll be simplistic and easy to play, because it's Exhorder and that's impossible. But it's still going to have its intricacies, and it's still going to be a very technical project. But I think it's just going to be music that speaks to more people. We've gotten a lot better and wiser as we've gotten older with songwriting, and the albums are only as strong as the songs on it. So that's my biggest mission right now, is to write songs that speak to people. And once I'm done with it, I walk away from it, and it no longer belongs to me. It belongs to the people. And if I'm right about my hunch that I have about it, I think the people are going to embrace it.
Now, are you guys planning on doing touring or anything like that this year?
Absolutely, but we're really focusing more on the album right now. I think we have a few dates in the spring and maybe summertime that are being talked about right now. Some of it, I think we're doing this Decibel Beer Fest in April. In was that somewhere in Pennsylvania, maybe Philadelphia. I know we're doing that, so I'm allowed to talk about that. But there's some things in the works too for summertime, I think, perhaps, and autumn, that they may be one-offs. We may be going back to Europe. I'm not positive. At this point, I go where they tell me to go. I like playing the dumb singer card. I've been so I've had my nose so deep into the writing process right now, that's really all I've been thinking about. I hadn't been thinking about touring too much. I'm pretty sure that 2020 is going to be a no holds barred tour till we drop kind of deal. So I'm looking to possibly get endorsements with Metamucil and Geritol, and anything that would facilitate me being on the road for a long time. Ibuprofen.
There you go. Well, if you're listening, so Kyle, also I want to mention really quick too, a little bit about Devil's Highway. I had Steve on the show a few months ago to talk about it, as we kind of remembered our friend Ralph Santolla. So tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved with that project.
Ralph and I made friends when he was playing with Obituary and I was in Alabama Thunder Pussy. We did main support for Obituary in when was it, the summer of 2007, spring, summer, and we hit it off instantly. He's as big of an idiot as I was at the time, so it was like, yeah, this is a match made in hell. And we just connected so quickly, and I remember him on that tour telling me, he's like, man, I've got a handful of songs that I want to do, and I've got a couple of guys that are interested in doing it. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, sure. and we talked about it a little bit, and it didn't come to much of anything right away, but then he called me with an offer for us to go to Japan as the Death Metal All-Stars, and it was me and Ralph, Steve Giorgio, Jack Owen, and Tony Laureano, and what we did was we just kind of took a sampling of all of the bands that we had been in and maybe played a couple songs by each one. And so we were playing Exhorder, Deicide, Obituary, Sadus, Death, and then we threw in like, you know, some Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult just for fun, you know.
Right.
And we went over there and had a blast. We played 2 weeks and we really bonded and really had a great time. And shortly after that, we started recording the album, which is, I want to say, 8-9 years ago we started recording this thing, and it just never did get completed. We right before Ralph started showing signs that he was sick, he had somehow managed to get Max Norman, the producer, on board, and so we went and spent a weekend with Max in Connecticut, and Ralph was feeling really bad, and he really wasn't able to get much guitar stuff done, so Max and I were just working on vocals, and then Ralph got sick, and I had to take him to the hospital, and he ended up, they had to put him in a medically induced coma for like a week, and then he just kind of, you know, over the next year, he just kind of battled with a handful of residual problems from all of that, and he was really trying to do his best to focus on getting healthy so he could finish the album, and unfortunately it didn't pan out that way, and so I've spoken with Max since, and with Ralph's mother through some emails and stuff, and they all want to finish the album. I want the album finished. I was on Ralph's ass about it long before he left us. Dude, we got to finish this album. It's long overdue, and it's really great stuff. Great enough for Max Norman to be involved with it. That says it right there. So it's something that's going to happen. It needs to happen, and it's Ralph's swan song. You know, so we've got to make sure we do it right. I think there's going to be a handful of guys on guitar that Ralph cherry-picked as he was in his last few months. You know, he kept saying, if something happens to me, to me. And I think he felt it coming, you know. But he picked a handful of guys that he would like to be the ones to come in and do things that he would have done to finish it, because they know how to approach it from his style. Right. You know, guys that he's jammed with, I think some he may have even taken on as students at some point. So for me, it's just, you know, I mean, I wrote the stuff with Ralph, so together we wrote this. It's our stuff, and you know, I've got my hands so full with all these other projects, but that one's just sitting there in the background because it was there before all of these other ones, and I'm just ready to have it complete so that everyone can share the last magic of Ralph. And I think, you know, like I told you, I was talking to Steve about a month ago, and his sentiments are exactly the same, you know. Got to get that thing complete, and it's like you said, it's like Ralph's swan song. And Kyle, if people want to learn more about any of your bands, I mean, is Facebook the best place to go nowadays to see where you're playing, and if you're gonna, you know, release something new or anything like that? I try. I have an artist page, and I try to, when things are happening, I try to update people through it. When things aren't happening that much, I I'm not as active on Facebook as I used to be. So probably the safest thing would be to just go and click on the actual band pages, and I mean give my artist page a like too, because I do interact there as well. But the Exhorder page, the Heaviest Texas page, and the Trouble page, those are all run by administrators that aren't me, so things actually get done there. But yeah, if you want to follow the three things that I have that are my busiest, most dedicated projects, Exhorder, Trouble, and Heaviest Texas, and just search them and go give them a like, and there'll be action there.
All right, well, there you guys go. Kyle Thomas, vocalist in millions of bands. Yep. You can follow the bands on their websites, Facebook, just type in the bands and all kinds of information comes up to see where, they're going to be playing, or what new music is coming out, or what new videos they're making. And, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the show, keeping us up to date on what's going on with you and all the bands, and gosh, all the best to you, and, and Exhorder and the new album and all you have going on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate you having me on.